Brooke, thank you so much for joining us on the Rising Beyond podcast.
Thank you for having me here. I'm excited to have this conversation and just see where it flows.
Yeah, I'm excited. People who have listened to the Rising Beyond podcast for a while have heard me talk about some of the similarities between coercive control, domestic violence, narcissistic abuse, intimate partner violence, whatever you would like to call it, and cults. And a lot of people have called these relationships a cult of one or a cult of two.
Mm.
And so I'm excited because you specialize in coercive control within cults and narcissism within cults. So, how did you get into doing that?
So, obviously, when you're interested in these things, it always comes from a backstory, right? You've always had to I think the best people are the best teachers when they've lived the experience. I teach women also about narcissistic abuse. So, I lived in a cult, obviously. I was raised in a cult since birth. I was, third, fourth generation. And it was just a way of our life, to be honest. I didn't really question it as a young child. But it was a doomsday. It was fear-based, it was control-based, there was manipulation, all these things you don't realize are going on, and you trust your parents. They tell you this is the truth, they tell you this is what you need to do, this is how you're supposed to live your life, and you just think, "Well, my parents know best," right? We always were taught that as kids, "Well, your parents know best, you gotta listen to your parents," and the Bible says that as well, and so you're doing what you're told, really, and that's the part of that experience where you don't realize that there's so much control happening, and for me, being raised in that environment was also fearful because my father was a narcissist and very angry. So I also was being presented this angry God, if you will, but I also had an angry father. So if I disobeyed or if I pushed the boundaries or if I questioned things and went outside the rules, that was when his anger came about. It was this I was being taught the same thing in the religion. If you don't obey God, God's going to punish you. God's going to kill you. Like, all of these fearful things. And as a young child, I was like, wow, I really can't do anything. I have to be a good girl. And so I had a lot of good girl conditioning and thinking I had to be perfect. So later as adult, I realized, oh my gosh, this is where I got my perfectionism. Like, wow, how do I and once you have this part of you, it's like really hard to get rid of it because
Yeah.
that's the way you've lived. But the similarities between being in a domestic violence relationship or any abusive relationship and a cult, it's the same. I like to say it's the same model, so the same tactics, right? They're using the same things to keep you under control, keeping you in fear, right, of leaving, and then not giving you your autonomy.
Yeah.
It's the exact same replica, and it's no wonder why I got stuck in an abusive relationship for 17 years, and then also stayed in the cult until I was almost 35 years old.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's like this blueprint for how this works and how to condition people to be afraid, to be all in. Right? That's the part that I think, people on the outside, it's, like, mind-boggling. Like, it can't be that bad because they seem so excited about it, or it can't be that bad. Why would they stay in this if it was so horrible? And that conditioning blueprint, man, it does its job.
Yes, it does it well. I mean, your mind really deceives you. Because even though there's like a sense, even for myself, when I would start to get older, I kind of started questioning certain things about the religion. I got disfellowshipped when I was 16 because I sinned before marriage. I had sex before marriage. But when that happens in that religion, you get outcast. So
Mhm.
they tell you, well, God has not forgiven you. And so you've got to basically pay the price of your sin. And so you have to go to the church and no one can look at you, no one can talk to you. So it's like being put in the corner for a period of time
Mhm.
until they say God says that you've repented. I spent about a year of that existence. And so I kept my head down. I had to go to high school. I wasn't allowed to do anything with the people there because they teach you that everybody on the outside is evil. And
Mhm.
so I just went to school and did nothing else. I had no social life besides my parents and my younger brother. And I was shamed And so this experience in itself was so traumatizing. I even started to question it then. I was like, this doesn't make sense. Like, I felt rebellious against it. Like, what well, if this religion is gonna do this, then I don't even wanna be in it. And so I kind of really stopped going or even wanting or having the desire to go for a while. And then having my parents' acceptance and love started to outweigh the fact that I wanted to be this independent person and independent thought. And I decided to go back because, again, it's that manipulation, right? If you leave, well, everybody disowns you, even your own parents.
Mhm.
And that in itself, it was too scary for me at the time. And so I decided to comply and I just kept my head down until and then I married someone who was in the religion. And so I kept my head down, doing the things I thought I was supposed to do to be accepted as a part of the community, a part of the clan, a part of my family. And really went against everything that my intuition was screaming at me to say, leave, get out.
Mhm.
This isn't normal. You shouldn't be hit in a relationship. You shouldn't be hurt in a relationship. All of these things, I just ignored them. I
Yeah.
ignored them and just I did as I was told. And it really wasn't because, I think in an abusive relationship, people don't, like you said, people don't realize it's like, well, why did you leave? Why did you stay? Like, that's crazy. Like, well, you never been in my shoes. And the same upbringing that I had, where one, a abusive relationship was modeled to me by my parents. Um, Second, I was taught to be submissive to my husband and the religion and to do as I was told or else. And then also that God hates a divorcing. And so in my mind, well, if
Mm.
I get divorced, God's gonna because I get divorced, and then that's gonna also I might die when God comes and destroys the wicked. So it was like all of these factors like working against me. It was like the ability to actually think for myself was not there.
Yeah. Yeah, and that stripping away of, like, agency, autonomy, curiosity, right? Those are the things that are stripped away in, an abusive relationship, and it was stripped away or not even allowed to become or develop because you were in it as a child.
Well, completely. I wasn't allowed to have curiosity. I even started to ask the question because in the religion where you're taught that there's a paradise and there's an Armageddon. So God's going to come at the end of the last days or whatever, and God's going to destroy the wicked. And then if you are obedient, there's a paradise at the end. And so you're taught this, like we go regularly, right, to these meetings. Like we're programmed, we're constantly going over the same information. We're like, and we can't look outside at any other information. So we're not even allowed to
Mhm.
learn about other religions. And so we're just so programmed and we don't even know it as a child. But I remember being a little girl and being like, well, I don't know how this makes sense. Like, wonder if you guys make it into paradise and I don't. Aren't you gonna be sad? And then I would flip it, like, what if I make it and you don't? Like, and they're like, "Oh, well, God will just erase all of that pain." And, like,
Mhm.
so it was like they had these, like, weird answers to these, inquisitive questions that really made sense, but they didn't wanna, like, think about those things. They didn't wanna use critical thinking skills to, like, actually consider, "Okay, well, maybe some of this doesn't make sense." Like, it's just that was what I started to feel when I was younger, but then I ignored it. Like, even those
Yeah.
little nudges, like, I was getting, I ignored that as well because everybody kept saying, "No, no, no. You can't talk like that,
Yeah.
think like that. You just read the books you're told to read, you believe what we tell you to believe, and that's it."
Yeah, and I'm thinking of, like, the differences, again, and similarities, but that in the different methods of isolation, even though it would seem that in this cult, like, everyone has these, like, visions or perceptions of, you all live in a compound or those kinds of things, which, yes, that those things happen, but you don't need, like, the structure of the compound. And in kind of an individually, domestic violence relationship, the ways that they isolate are really similar. So it may, those people on the outside are dangerous. In the relationship, it might be they don't understand us.
Mm.
They're jealous. They don't have what we have. And so you're like, oh my God, no, they don't. And so then there's this subtle isolation. So it's a little bit more subtle,
Mm.
but it's there. It's similar.
Yeah, it is. And It keeps you trapped. I mean, that's I think a lot has to do with it too. I remember being in my abusive relationship where it was like I couldn't hang out with who I wanted to hang out with. I was isolated from anybody that made that person feel insecure. They didn't want to engage in social activities because they kind of thought they were better than everybody else or whatever. But it was also like not letting me have that expression of myself, right? And then making me feel guilty for even wanting it.
Mhm.
And that was really was similar to the cult, right? Like, it was like, okay, if I wanted to go and hang out with somebody that wasn't a part of the religion, oh, I got guilt and shame. You even like, if people started to know that you were doing that, you would even get taken back into the back room and be talked by to the elders, like how I was engaging in worldly association is what they would call it. And so it's like it's all this like ability to make you feel guilt and shame over where you should actually have the freedom to do as you please, and they don't allow that. They wanna keep a close, hold on you and make sure that you remember that they're in charge, not you.
Mhm. Yeah, and I'm thinking one of the things that is so harmful that I see, one of the most, like, heartbreaking pieces you brought up similarly is when a survivor, a victim or survivor leaves the abusive relationship and their parents back the abuser.
Mm, mhm.
And maybe their parents help fund their abuser's family court fees, or they are, the flying monkeys or maybe they're not just flying monkeys, maybe they are just abusive in their own right, but that join in the smear campaign and do all of those things, that is one of the most heartbreaking things in these relationships that I've seen. And that is what happens within the cult system too, is your parents would shun you too.
Mhm. Yeah. Oh, yeah, and you'd also get a smear campaign because everybody like, all of my friends and everybody that was in that community, they also abandoned me, obviously, because they were told they had to. But you know that there was talk and banter of who knows what was said about me. It really taught me to learn how to let go of what other people thought of me, especially when I started to use my voice. It was like a lot of fear came up like, well, if I'm going to talk about this stuff openly, I'm going to be on podcasts, I'm going to be on news, I'm going to do all of these things, I'm going to write a book about it. Like, like I'm also going to have to realize that, wow, my story is like really going to be out there. And it made me feel very vulnerable. I felt very afraid. And I sabotaged really releasing my book for about a year and a half because of
Mhm.
that fear in itself of like, oh, what are people going to think about me? What's going to be said about me? All these people that I once loved, like even my own family that's still in the cult. But I just realized, you know what? This was a part of my journey and I chose to rise above it. Like I chose to say that this is not for me. I know that this is not the truth. I know that this doesn't make any sense. And I feel like that was a gift. And I'm
Mhm.
like, what am I going to do with this gift that I got? Am I going to stay quiet? Am I going to do what I was always told to do was stay quiet, be silenced anymore? No, I'm going to change that. Not only for my boys to see, but for other women to see that, you know what? It may be scary to talk about these things, but you have a story and your story can help someone and that could change their life. So why not just let it be told?
Yeah, and I'm thinking what levels, or maybe they're still there, of hypervigilance stayed with you? How were you able to decrease some of that hypervigilance of always looking over your shoulder? And again, I am sure it will pop up here and there, still.
Oh
But
man,
what was the most helpful way to start to tame your nervous system a little
yeah.
bit?
Boy, you really brought up something huge here. That was I don't even know how to explain it. That was the bane of my existence. Um, I was sexually abused when I was 3 years old. So for me, my body, I had never felt safe in my body. It's extreme body dysmorphia, very dissociated from my entire existence. I didn't realize how dissociated I was from my emotions and, how my body had really just survived to keep me safe, really. And then being raised in the abusive environment with my father and then the abuse. it was no wonder my nervous system was, like, always looking. I'm like, "Oh my, who's looking at me? Who's watching me? Who's coming after me? When's God gonna kill me? When," "when's the next
Mhm.
eruption gonna happen with my husband?" Like, there was always this sense of unease in my nervous system, so it had completely wired my whole body to be just on the run. And I really
Yep.
felt that, like, when I left the relationship and I realized how trauma bonded I had been, it was like almost like I hit this like massive panic, and my whole body was just like I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat, I lost an extreme amount of weight. It was like I was coming off of a drug. I was just really learning how to even exist at that point without,
Mhm.
just trying to find my footing because I left the cult and the relationship at the same time. So my whole belief system was gone. My whole identity was gone. I don't even know if I had an identity to begin with because everybody had never let me have one. And so it was like, okay, who am I now? And when I started to heal and go to therapy and stuff, she's like, okay, well, your nervous system is dysregulated and you just need to be present. And I looked at her and I was like, what? Like, it was like I'm like, "You could say these things to me, but they don't make sense to the woman that has been beaten, battered, afraid, fear, like, literally instilled with fear her whole entire life by a cult." It just didn't make any sense. So those things, I was hitting roadblocks and I was saying, "This doesn't work." So I just started picking up modality after modality, just trying to find something
Yeah.
that would cure the pain, right? Because, I didn't wanna resort to drugs, I didn't wanna resort to alcohol, I didn't wanna be reliant on depression medication. I always had a intuition about holistic, being and naturopath, and so I really wanted to find something that worked. And what really started to work was RTT, which is what I do, rapid transformational therapy. So I started working with my subconscious mind, through hypnosis, processing a lot of the trauma and actually releasing all the emotional baggage that I was holding on to. I was carrying this big old heavy backpack around with me and I didn't even know it, and started to release some of that. And that started to help me. And then learning the nervous system tools to kind of go with it, right? So I became a meditator. I like forced myself into meditation, if
Mhm.
you will, because my body didn't want to sit still. But the more that I recognized I didn't want to sit still and how uncomfortable I was, it was the more I knew I needed it. So I just learned through my journey, the more that uncomfortable I felt doing something, that was what I needed to dive into, because that meant I was actually reaching a part of me that needed to be healed.
Yeah, and it's so tricky because you can be 5, 6, 8, 10 years out of the relationship and something shows up and man, you are in fight, flight, freeze.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And so it's really and it's just right, it's your brain, nothing to be I mean, you can be like there's some frustration with that, but your brain is doing what it's meant to do. It's here to keep
Yeah.
you alive and safe.
Yes.
And so it's that mindfulness when people are and really I'm a therapist and I remember when people were like, talking about being grounded. I was like, what the F does that even mean?
Yes, totally.
Like that doesn't make sense to me.
Yes.
And so just kind of learning and what works for you may not work for someone else,
Yes.
right? That's so important to decide. That's part of that autonomy.
Mhm.
What can work for you?
Yes. I think it's also learning about, for me, it was like learning about my body, learning about the nervous system, learning about the trauma that I had undergone, but also the fact that I was like, okay, if I can just learn how to navigate this a little bit better, because anxiety was such a huge thing. I was diagnosed with PTSD, complex PTSD, even though it's not on the realm of diagnosis. I had someone say, "Oh, well, you have complex PTSD," and I mean, I felt it in my body, right? So what
Yeah.
thing could trigger me, and I would be down and out for the day, right? I wouldn't even be. I would just be lost in the trigger. And so what I needed to do was learn those triggers and understand why my body was being triggered, and then start to also learn how to navigate it. So I wasn't getting lost in the spiral, if you will. And if you've been through severe abuse, if you've been, and if it's been years, it's all your body knows. I mean, it's normal. I think that you're going to have these moments. I still have these moments that happen. It can be just a felt sense of something that my body thinks is happening now, but actually happened in the past. Now I have so much awareness. I'm able to say, oh, okay, this is not what's really happening. But my body does feel activated by this for a certain reason. And so I just need to take a breath. So I can come back into my prefrontal cortex and actually have some logic here because
Mhm.
he is such an emotional creature. And I think women are emotional anyway, more emotionally driven than men. But some of us are even more emotion based because a lot of the reason is because that's how we grew up. And we didn't have access to the logic and the rational like means to like critically think. And so I've had to learn that as a skill. Had to learn that
Yeah.
as a skill. And that takes some time.
Yeah. And some of the things you're talking about is so important because the things that you didn't get to learn as a child and the things that you had to work really hard on, you know, after you've left, those are all the things because I do a lot of parenting work with these mamas. Those are all the things that you, listener, as the mom, get to give your children.
Mhm.
You get to allow them to think critically. They can disagree with you. You can have a great discussion and still not agree on things. You can give them unconditional love. So, right, love where there's no strings attached. You can allow them autonomy and agency to try things on. And so, as we're talking, it is for you as well as someone healing from the abuse. But all of those things that are going to help you are going to help build that resilience for your kids if they are going back and forth and they are living part-time with someone who is going to coercively control as their parenting strategy.
Yeah, completely. Thankfully, I wish I would have learned all of those things earlier on when my children were a little bit younger. But, now I'm able to give them that, and to
Mhm.
show that mirror that back for them so that they can see that and they can understand that, "Oh, wait, this is the way to operate," or, "This is how I can deal with a challenge." Right? Rather than becoming emotionally volatile, I can actually I can take a breath and I can think through this and find my way out and showing that they're very capable because I wasn't shown that. Like as you said, like I realized when I became adult, like I have zero emotional intelligence. It's like
Mhm.
like I'm sure if I would have taken a test, I would have scored very low on that IQ because my emotional intelligence, all I saw was it was either anger or we suppress our emotions. There was like I'm like, "Okay, well, I guess we're either angry or we just don't talk about things. We don't cry." And so it was very strange to have to grow up and be like, "Okay, wow, really wasn't taught these things," and starting to see, like, other people that were, like, able to navigate things way better than I was started to say to me, "Oh my gosh, I need to get some help here." Like, there's some things to discover about myself and learn so that I can even have this. And what makes me sad about this is that they don't teach this in schools, right?
Yeah.
They're not
Yep.
teaching, I think, the most critical skills of being a human being. And I think that's where we're kind of lacking for the generations now. Because okay, great, you're teaching them our old history, and they're teaching them things that like really don't matter about them becoming a good human or a human that's able to handle the ups and downs of life, and it makes me kind of sad. I'm like, wow, we really need to change the whole entire system.
Yeah. I have lots of thoughts on our systems. So many thoughts.
Yeah, I'm sure to go on that a whole other podcast for sure.
Right? I'm like,
I
I
would
have
think
lots of thoughts on
same.
on those things.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because when like I think about the social emotional learning that like our my boys have in their school, and it seems so ridiculously basic,
Yeah.
but there are so many kids where that is just like like mind blowing. They've never heard it. They've never been introduced to any of it.
Yep.
And so it's like, oh gosh, yes, we do. We have to start at the bottom. Like we have to start, lower than we think we have to start because there's so many kids who don't have that, being taught at home.
And then
Even again, even at schools, a lot not I don't, I know what my boys' schools do and some of the schools in our area, but
yeah.
not.
They don't
Not
teach it,
sure what's
and
going on in all the other schools in other states.
I know, it's just it makes me sad, and I think, honestly, that's a lot of the reason why I do a lot of inner child work. That was a huge part of my journey too. I don't know, I'm sure you're probably familiar with that, like,
Mhm.
child work. I mean, because that was that little girl that never was taught how she could handle her emotions. And it
Yeah.
was inside of me. And when I started to work with, like, the, internal family systems and the parts work that kinda comes into play, I was like, "Oh, wow, okay, well, now I can kinda understand some parts of my psyche that I didn't really understand, kinda maybe have been abandoned, buried, not really paid attention to, but we're, like, screaming for attention.
Mhm.
We're trying to be like, 'Hey, pay attention to me,' like, and realizing that, when you have severe trauma, parts of you get fragmented. And it's just the way it works, right? And so you become survival mode and you're just kind of doing everything in autopilot. And then when you start to kind of dig a little deeper and heal on a deeper level like that and start to meet parts of yourself, you start to kind of integrate the whole, right? And become more of an authentic person because now you're maybe, for some, I've found a lot of people, clients are like, well, I'm always angry. Okay, well, maybe you just got stuck in that part of you, right? That's got like some trauma because you are angry because of things that happened in the past that you never got to process because maybe you had this horrible childhood and you're pissed off at a parent, right? And it's just letting you process those things. And all of a sudden, the anger dissipates. Like now you've paid attention.
Yeah, one of the parts I see very often in the women I work with is that very self-critical part, and when the women I work with can see that as a protection, like that is protecting other parts of you, and it's maybe not helpful, but it doesn't know a different way yet, and so if you can look at each, be curious and look at each part and kind of like, what is its function? What is it doing to help you? The goal is not to harm you, but it might be harming you on accident. And so being able to give yourself some grace as you're bungling through all this healing, because healing is not pretty and it is not linear and it can be all over the place and you can feel amazing, doing this work. And then all of a sudden something hits you and you're like, wow, I'm a hot mess again. That's
Yeah.
neat. And that's okay,
Right. Of
because
course.
that's part of the process. It's part of the process. So what would you say, like, when you're working with women, granted this is, depends on where women are coming in, but kind of commonly, where is like the first step? So they already know, like, wow, this was abusive. They may not have that language. They may not use the term abusive, but like this was toxic. This is, whatever their language is. Where do you start with people as they, kind of start the healing process?
Yeah. Well, first, I like to always help them identify what was wrong in the relationship, what wasn't healthy. So I like to teach them healthy versus not healthy. I know for myself, I didn't know. I had no idea.
Mhm.
Right. So sometimes it's like, okay, we know it's something bad happened, but how bad, like when you leave, you finally start to unravel how bad it really was, like what you were really surviving in. And then you're like, oh my gosh, eyes wide open. But then the next component where I first really start is actually we go into hypnosis and we do a hypnotherapy session on entirely on the belief of I am unsafe. And the reason why I do this is because when we leave these environments, like you said, we're already hypervigilant. We don't even know because we don't know we've been existing like this. Our nervous system has been in this state forever. And so
Mhm.
we have no idea that we're hypervigilant. We don't know why we have anxiety, right? We don't know what's going on. But I go into those spaces so that they can process the memories of that unsafeness. Often things will come up, honestly, memories that they don't even remember in their conscious awareness.
Mhm.
It can bring up, things that are very much a surprise, but also the root cause of why their body feels so unsafe. And so once they have that awareness, we're then starting to be able to work through the nervous system awareness. Because until we process the things that the body still is like, I'm still unsafe because everything in the subconscious believes it's happening right now. So it's why you operate the way that you do. And so when we can figure that out, well, we have awareness. Okay, we can tell the body, we can tell the mind, well, this is not happening right now. I'm not, this is okay. I
Mhm.
am safe. I'm not unsafe anymore. I am safe. And so we can kind of start to rewire the brain and the body at the same time.
Yeah, and if you are listening and you're like, "I'm actually not safe," or "My kids aren't safe," a lot of my audience is stuck, co-parenting with their abusive ex till forever, in and out of family court, every other month or whatever it looks like. And so there are moments that you are not safe, but that doesn't mean you're always not safe. And I think that's the tricky piece when you're having to go into unsafe places and your kids are going off to unsafe places,
Mhm.
finding the moments where you are safe, finding those moments of
Yeah.
felt safety so that you can start doing that work. And I think that's why, that post separation piece is so difficult. Again, when you share kids, because we don't get to go no contact or you don't get to do those things. But there are times where it's safe to feel safe.
Yeah. Exactly, and it's so true, and, even though we go through those things, you're not always gonna feel like you're safe. That's just not gonna happen in the world that we live in, right? You're gonna have those moments. I think what I like to teach women is, okay, if I even am in a moment where I'm activated, my ex-husband is here, or I'm having to deal with him because of the kids, how can they still stay grounded and present in that moment and be able to handle things in a way where they're not in panic? Because in panic or when we're in our emotion, we always don't make good decisions because emotion rules over logic. And so I really just want to show them how important these components are and how their brain works so that they can really be able to handle situations like this in such like a neutral way. So we even work a lot of in hypnosis how to become neutral. Almost like where
Mhm.
they have no emotion, like, it's like they won't even get activated any longer by that ex-husband because their body and their mind have already completed it, like, the cycle, the loop of the energy that that has even caused, and then they all of a sudden, even if he reacts or does something, it's almost like they can be like, "Okay, well, you're just playing out your little game again. No big deal." Like, you know what I mean? And just not have a
Mhm.
reaction because when they react, they're get the abuser is taking their power away. I wanna teach you not to let them take your power away anymore so that you have a neutrality of how you operate with them. And that's when you get your power back, right? I wanna show you, you can have your power. They don't get to engage in that. And it's hard to get there. It takes some time. It takes some work. So just so you know, everybody, like it's not overnight here. This is a lot of work, but it is possible.
Yeah. And I think something I see is there's a fear of letting some of that go. Like, what if I
Mhm.
don't, right? I am unsafe and I don't, my nervous system doesn't do the right thing. And I like to let people know, guess what? You don't actually have a whole lot of say if you are legit not safe. There is a lion chasing you.
Yeah.
Your nervous system's going to hop right on board and do what it needs to do. So it doesn't mean then that it's not going to work how it needs to work
Right.
when you're in really scary, unsafe situations. Your brain's gonna do what it's gonna do,
Yeah. It's automatic. You don't even have an option.
right?
Like,
It's just gonna do the thing.
yeah, it literally is meant there to keep you alive. So it's gonna do what it's supposed to do.
Yeah, if there like, there's just not a way to override that.
There is not.
But when you can train your nervous system, like in, getting the thing that causes so much anxiety for my mamas is getting either like the notification to your co-parenting app
Mhm.
that, right, ex-partner has something to say in there, or you get an email from your attorney or their attorney or
Yeah.
whatever it might be, right? Like that immediate fight, flight, freeze. And so, like, how amazing would it be to initially have that initial moment and be able to be like, nope, nope, I am safe.
Yeah.
It is an email, it is a piece of paper, it is in my phone.
Yes.
And so that's what we're kind of talking about.
It's detaching from that. You learn that in NLP. I don't know, maybe neuro-linguistic programming, but you learn really how to like be able to learn from the brain how when those things are activated to actually feel like this detachment from them. And so you can't, like I said, so you can have that neutrality. It was one of the best gifts that I ever did learning how to do that and show other people because it was like it helped to me also be able to navigate those sticky situations where those things do activate you And then you're just trapped in the fear again, right? In that same emotion, that same energy that that person continued to make you feel all your life. And if you have to deal with them for however many more years until your children are adults or forever, right? Like you want to be able to get to a space where that no longer affects you the way it did in the past. Because that is hijacking your nervous system every time. It's hijacking your ability to stay in your truth and your ability to feel that safeness. And so I think it's really important to learn those when you leave those environments because you're gonna have to battle probably
Yeah.
for the rest
Yep.
of that time, and I know a lot of women that have had to struggle with those things, and I know that well. I had the same experience, until the father of my children passed. So it was a very it's difficult. So my heart goes out to all of you that are still battling that.
Yep. And that's why, like, Brooke's doing her thing, I'm doing my thing, we got our community, we're doing everything we can. So, Brooke, tell us a little bit about you have a book and more information about how people can learn from you.
Yeah, so I have Shattered, Broken, and Beautiful. So this really my memoir about leaving the cult, being raised in a narcissistic family dynamic, and how that then made me fall in the same trap of being in an abusive relationship. Right? How I broke free. Honestly, how I had my own spiritual awakening after my then husband passed. That really helped me kind of come back to who I was meant to be, I think, in this lifetime. The grief and watching my children grieve. That also birthed another book. It was a children's book. It's called The Grief Monster. So for anybody that's had a loss, if a parent for their children or any loss, honestly, this grief monster is here to help kids process grief and help them just know, like, yeah, we all have a grief monster, and sometimes we have to sit with our grief, and that's okay. And we can ask for support or we can, feel our feelings. And I noticed that there was not enough books about grief when my children, had to survive this. And so I was like, I gotta create something like this. So I created that as well. But they can find me on lifecoachinggoddess.com. I'm on all the social media as that as well. And so they can just reach out or find my books on Amazon.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I'm so glad we're connected. There's such overlap, and I love how you're supporting women in your community as well. And so, yeah, y'all, if you were driving and you did not write any of that down, no worries, everybody. It's going to be in the show notes, or you can always, reach out to me. Y'all know that. And I will connect you with whomever you need connected with. Brooke, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate you.
And thank you to all of you listening. I appreciate you. I do this for you. And we'll catch you on the next episode of the Rising Beyond podcast.